There was still motor oil under my fingernails when I pulled into my mother's driveway that Tuesday evening. I had spent the day crawling under a client's rental property in Tempe, Arizona, checking pipes, marking what needed replacing before the city inspector came Friday. I was 31 years old, running a small property maintenance company I had built from a single contractor's license and a second-hand truck. I was tired in the good way, the kind of tired that means something got done. My mother had been living in the same house in Gilbert for 22 years. After my father passed, my older brother Marcus and I had both quietly agreed, without ever saying it out loud, that we would make sure she was taken care of. Marcus handled the bigger things, the roof repair 2 years ago, the HVAC replacement last spring. I handled the steady things, groceries twice a month, the utility bills I had set to auto-pay from my account since 2021, the property tax installments I had been splitting with Marcus since we lost my father. It was never discussed as an arrangement. It was just what we did, because she was our mother. My younger sister Candace had moved back in with her 3 years earlier after a divorce. Candace was 34, between jobs more often than not, and had a talent for making every room feel smaller. My mother adored her, in the way some mothers adore the child who needs them most. I understood it. I did not enjoy being on the receiving end of it. I parked behind Candace's car and noticed the front curtain move. When I walked through the door, my mother was sitting at the kitchen table with her arms crossed. Candace was standing near the counter, and next to her was a woman I did not immediately recognize, then did. It was Renata, my mother's neighbor from 2 houses down, a woman who had inserted herself into our family's business for as long as I could remember. My mother looked at me the way people look at someone they have already decided something about. She said my name once. Then she said, "We need to talk about the money." I set my bag down. I asked which money. What happened in the next 40 minutes was one of those experiences you keep turning over for weeks afterward, trying to find the angle where it makes sense. My mother told me, with Renata nodding along and Candace studying the floor, that she had spoken to Marcus, and that Marcus had told her I had been collecting rent from her eastern storage unit without telling anyone. That storage unit was attached to a small parcel of land my father had left in both my name and Marcus's. We had been renting it to a landscaping company for $1,400 a month for the past 2 years. I had been depositing my half into the shared account Marcus and I kept specifically for my mother's expenses. Every single deposit. For 24 months. My mother said Marcus told her I had been keeping the money for myself, that I had never put a dollar of it toward her bills, that I had been taking advantage of a grieving widow. I remember the specific quality of the silence in that kitchen. The refrigerator hum, Renata smoothing her shirt. I asked my mother if she wanted to see the account statements. She said she did not need to see paperwork. She said she trusted her son. I asked where Marcus was. She said that was not the point. She said the point was that she could no longer trust me in this house, around her things, with access to anything connected to her finances. She told me that the spare key I had carried for 11 years needed to come back to her tonight. She told me that until I could make things right with Marcus, I was not welcome to come and go as I had been. Candace, at this point, looked up from the floor long enough to say, "We just think you need to be accountable, Claire." My name is not Claire, but that is not the story. I am telling you this, so you understand the atmosphere of that kitchen. My sister used a word like accountable while standing in a house whose electric bill I had paid for 4 years. I took the key off my ring. I set it on the table. I picked up my bag. My mother said, "Is that all you have to say?" I said, "I'll let the statements speak." I drove home with motor oil still under my fingernails and did not cry until I was through my own front door. "What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? Because I want you to stay with me here. Because what I found over the next 6 weeks is the part of this story that I needed to understand before I could tell it." I gave myself 3 days. I did not call my mother. I did not call Marcus. I went to work. I pulled the account statements. I organized everything in a folder with dates and amounts and the name of the landscaping company that had been writing the checks. I had documentation for every transaction going back to the beginning, not because I had anticipated needing it, but because I am someone who keeps records. Running a business teaches you that. On the fourth day, I called Marcus. He did not answer. He texted me 30 minutes later. Can't talk right now. We'll call soon. He did not call. I called again on the seventh day. He answered this time, sounding slightly out of breath, and before I could say more than 2 sentences, he told me he had already explained everything to Mom, and he did not want to rehash it. I asked him what exactly he had explained. He said I knew what I had done. I told him I had the account records in front of me. He said, "Records can look like a lot of things." I asked him directly, "Did you tell Mom I was keeping the rental income for myself?" There was a pause that told me everything the pause needed to tell me. He said, "I told her what I understood to be happening." I asked him what he understood to be happening. He said the landscaping company had told him when he called to check on the lease renewal that payments had been going to my personal account. Not the shared account. My personal account. I went very still. I told him that was not possible. I told him every deposit had gone into the shared account. I told him to check his own online banking right now, while we were on the phone. He said he didn't have time. I asked him if he had even looked before going to our mother with this. There was another pause. He said he had trusted what the landscaping company told him. I asked him to send me the name of the person he had spoken to at the company. He said he would have to find it. He never sent it. Here is what I found when I started pulling on that thread. The landscaping company Saguaro Grounds LLC had a new office manager as of 8 months earlier. Her name was Pauline, and Pauline had no record of our original lease agreement in her system because the previous manager, when he left, had apparently taken the physical files with him. Pauline had been getting payment instructions from an email address she believed belonged to the property owner. The email address was 1 letter off from mine. 1 letter. The kind of difference you don't catch if you're skimming. Someone had contacted Saguaro Grounds 8 months ago, posing as me, and redirected the rent payments. When I finally got Pauline on the phone, she was mortified. She pulled up the email chain and read the address back to me. She read me the account number the redirected payments had been going to. It was not mine. It was not the shared account Marcus and I held. I wrote the account number down on a yellow legal pad and sat with it for a long moment. Then I called my bank and asked them to trace any incoming transfers connected to that account number in the past 8 months. Then I called a friend of mine who works in financial compliance and described what I had found, without using any names. She said, "That's wire fraud." She said it calmly, the way people say true things. I sat with that for the rest of the evening. I am going to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters. I did not feel vindicated. I did not feel relieved. I felt something cold and specific that took me a while to name. I felt the particular loneliness of realizing that someone who has known you your entire life looked at you and chose to believe the worst, without asking a single question first. My mother had that key on the table before I could say one word. Marcus had walked into our mother's kitchen with a story he had not verified, about money, about me, in front of a neighbor who had no business being there. The amount that had been redirected over 8 months was $11,200. That is not a small amount of money to take from a rental property co-owned by 2 people managing their late father's estate. I want to pause here and tell you something, because the comment I hear most often when I tell this story is some version of, "Why didn't you just show them the records right away? Why didn't you fight harder in that kitchen?" And my answer is that I have watched enough of these situations to know that a room that has already made its decision is not a room that can hear you. Showing receipts to someone who said they didn't need to see paperwork is not a conversation. It's a performance for an audience that isn't watching. I needed to know what I was actually dealing with before I walked back into that kitchen. I needed the full picture. And I needed to know who, specifically, had redirected those payments. My financial compliance friend connected me with a fraud investigator she had worked with before, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes, a woman named Beverly who had a way of speaking that made everything sound already solved. Beverly traced the account within 2 weeks. I am going to tell you what she found, and I need you to stay with me here, because this is the part where the shape of the whole story changes. The account the payments had been redirected to was opened 18 months earlier. The name on the account was a variant of Marcus's full legal name, not his nickname, his full name. the name on his birth certificate that almost no one except the government uses. The email address used to contact Saguaro Grounds had been created through a free service and deleted, but Beverly recovered enough metadata to establish it had been created and accessed from an IP address in Scottsdale. Marcus lived in Scottsdale. Beverly put a folder on my kitchen table and said, "What do you want to do with this?" I thought about my father. I thought about the way he used to make coffee on Sunday mornings and leave a cup on the counter for whoever woke up next. I thought about $11,200, and my mother's crossed arms, and Candace saying the word accountable in a house I had helped keep lit. I said, "I want to handle this correctly." Beverly nodded like she had expected that answer. What came next took another 3 weeks because I wanted it done properly. I contacted an attorney. I sent Marcus a formal letter through her, attaching the evidence Beverly had compiled, and giving him 14 days to respond before I escalated to law enforcement. I did not call my mother during this time. I did not ask anyone to take my side. I simply waited. On the 11th day, Marcus called me. He did not open with an apology. He opened with, "Where did you get all of this?" I told him I had hired someone. He said, "I don't know how it looks, but there's an explanation." I told him I had 14 days for that explanation, and he had used 11 of them. He asked if we could meet in person. I said yes, at my attorney's office, with her present. He went quiet, then he said he would come. He came on day 13. I want to be careful about how I tell this part, because I am not interested in humiliating anyone for sport. What I will tell you is that Marcus sat across from me in my attorney's office and did not deny what Beverly had found. He said he had been in debt, a specific kind of debt he described as a bad investment decision that had become something he could not talk to anyone about. He said he had only meant to borrow the redirected payments, that he had planned to put the money back before anyone noticed, and that when the new office manager flagged the account discrepancy to him, he panicked, and rather than come to me directly, he went to our mother first, with a version of events that would, as he put it, give him more time. Give him more time. He had spent 11 months redirecting rental income from our shared account. He had then walked into our mother's house and told her I was the one stealing. He had taken the key off my keychain without being in the room for it, and he had done it to buy himself time. My attorney asked him if he was prepared to make full restitution. He said yes. She asked him if he was prepared to correct the record with our mother. He said yes, but he asked if it could be done without Renata present. I told him that was not my problem to solve. The meeting with my mother happened 5 days later. I did not script it. I did not rehearse what I was going to say, because I had learned by then that there is no script for a room where someone has to admit they were wrong about you. All you can do is be present for it. Marcus sat down and talked for 20 minutes. My mother did not interrupt him. Candace was not there, she was at work, which I think was better for everyone. My mother listened to her son explain that he had taken money, that he had lied about it, and that he had let his sister walk out of this house without her key while he sat with information that made the whole picture look different. When he finished, my mother was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at me and said, "I should have asked to see the paperwork." It was not a big statement. It was 6 words. But I want you to understand what it took for a woman like my mother to say them, because she is not a person who reverses herself easily, and she is not a person who apologizes in grand gestures. 6 words from her carry weight. I told her I understood. I told her that what I needed from her was not an apology, exactly. I needed her to know that the next time someone walked into her kitchen with a story about me, she could ask me before she decided. I needed there to be a next time where she asked. She nodded. She looked older than she had the last time I was in that kitchen. I think that happens when you realize you've been carrying the wrong version of something. Marcus paid the full restitution within 30 days per the agreement my attorney drafted. He also reimbursed me separately for Beverly's fees and my attorney's time, which had not been a requirement but which he offered, and which I accepted without comment. Renata, from 2 houses down, texted my mother at some point during all of this. Apparently she had heard through someone that the situation had resolved itself and wanted to know the details. My mother, to her credit, did not answer the text. She told me this herself. A few weeks later, when I stopped by with groceries and we sat at the kitchen table and had coffee the way we used to. I have the key back. It is on my keyring where it has been for 11 years, and I notice it differently now than I did before. What I want to leave you with is not a moral. I am not interested in wrapping this up with a lesson that makes it feel smaller than it was. What I will say is this: there is a specific kind of trust that exists between a person who keeps quiet records and the people who assume that quietness means nothing is written down. I kept records because running a business requires it. I kept records because my father taught me that the most important things should be documented. Not because you distrust people, but because documentation is a form of respect for the truth. The truth, in this case, was patient. It waited in spreadsheets and bank statements, and a yellow legal pad with an account number written in blue ink. It waited while I was walked out of my own family's history without a question asked on my behalf. But it did not disappear. It never does. The question I keep coming back to, and I will leave it with you, because I do not think I have finished answering it myself, is this: what do you do with the trust that got broken on the way to the truth? Not the facts, not the money, not the key. The thing that was assumed about you, quietly, before anyone asked. How do you hold that? I am still working on that part, but I sat at my mother's kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and the door unlocked, and I think that is where the work happens. Not in the dramatic moments, but in the ordinary ones that follow. The ones where you choose to come back, or you choose not to, and either choice is something you have to live inside of. I chose to come back. That is the part that belongs to me.